This is lesson 3.3, and if you will turn to page 141, and at the top of that page gives our essential question of finding complex solutions by completing the square. So at this point, you should have already reviewed how to complete the square and also how to use the quadratic formula to solve quadratic equations. So we're going to move to the bottom of this page and look at example B. And in this example, we are given a quadratic equation, and we're going to solve it by completing the square. So if you recall, we start by writing the equation in the form of x squared plus bx equals c. So we get x squared minus 2x equals negative 7. All right, we have to identify b, which is negative 2. We take that b, we divide it by 2, and we square it. And in that case, we get 1. So I'm going to go ahead and simplify the fraction, which gives me negative 1, and you square it and you get 1. So we're going to add that 1 to both sides. And then continuing in the next column, we have x squared plus 2x plus 1 and equals negative 7 plus 1. So I'm just carrying that over. We're going to factor the left side as a perfect square. And there's a typo in your book. That should be a negative 2x up there. So that factors as x minus 1 quantity squared. On the right hand side, we get negative 6. Take the square root of both sides, and we get plus or minus the square root of negative 6. Add 1 to both sides, and we get x equals 1 plus or minus a negative 6. Now we know that we can simplify that square root of negative 6 using an imaginary number. So both of these solutions are going to be non-real. The first solution is 1 plus I square root 6, and the second solution is 1 minus I square root of 6. So notice your two solutions are non-real and you end up with two complex solutions. Now let's look at an example of using the quadratic formula and finding complex solutions. Turn over to page 143 where it says explain 3. So in this example, example 3, letter A, the book has already solved for you. Notice that they use here's your quadratic equation. They use the quadratic formula to solve for x. And as you simplify, you end up with the square root of negative 156 in the numerator. And in that case, we can simplify that square root of negative 156. And they actually skip a step in here. I'll write it in here. You end up with 2 plus or minus 2i square root of 39, because 39 times 4 is 156. All divide by negative 10. And the way we simplify this, you can simplify the first term divided by negative 10, and then the second term divided by negative 10. And you end up with this as your two solutions. Let's turn the page and try one together. All right, so here in the middle of the page, example B, we have our quadratic equation. Now we do need to make sure it is set equal to 0, so we're going to add 1 to both sides. That will give us 7x squared plus 2x plus 4 equals 0. All right, now let's carefully substitute in A, B, and C. So x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c, all divided by 2 times a. All right, we end up with negative 2 plus or minus the square root, and if we do the math underneath the square root symbol, we end up with negative 108 8, and in the denominator we have 2 times 7, which gives us 14. 108. That comes down to 36 times 3. So that square root is going to simplify as 6i, because we have the negative sign, with a 3 left underneath the radical. I still have a negative 2 out front. All right, let's talk about how we simplify this fraction. First, I'm going to simplify 2, let me circle it for you, this negative 2 divided by 14. So I'm going to divide everything by 2. So this becomes a 1, this becomes a 7, and if I divide the first term by 2, I have to divide the second term by 2 also, and that's going to become a 3. So we end up with negative 1 plus or minus 3i square root of 3 all divided by 7. If we do separate those, one way you could write that is negative 1/7 plus or minus 3i square root of 3 all over 7. Okay, or you could keep it all, I'd probably prefer you keep it all under one fraction bar. Kind of keeps it simpler. So negative 1 plus or minus 3i square root of 3 all over 7. So I think your book here was actually wanting you to separate the plus or minus sign. I wanted to show you just 2 different ways, okay, that are equivalent. Just equivalent ways to express the solution. Just like any other equation, you can check your solution by substituting one of the values back into the original equation. I'm not going to do that here. I'll leave that for you to practice if you so choose to. It's your turn to practice. Under your turn, let's just do number 8.